Good afternoon, everybody. They're all wandering around, so that's fine. Right. Good afternoon, everybody. I was asked to come and talk about SETsquared partnership and an example of what we're doing and explain it to you. Thank you. SETsquared partnership works across 5 universities, and we are working across quite a wide geographic area. In some of your terms that's not that wide, but in UK terms it is. So we spread from just south of London across to Bristol, down to Exeter and across to Southampton. And we work with 5 universities in that area. Those 5 universities, well, the region itself is very lucky in that we have the highest number of businesses outside of London created within the South East region. I'm sure there's a pointer on here somewhere. Yeah, so within this sort of area here, we also have, which is most important to us, the highest proportion of professional science and technology companies created in that space. So we're very lucky that we have a very rich area. And as I say, the partnership has been going for 10 years. We just had our celebration, and there's some documents around which sort of was a big event that we had yesterday up in London, which was a very nice figurehead event. We work across the 5 universities, but we work separately within each of those universities. But interesting enough, talking around the tables, I think it's worth talking about. You were talking about spin-offs, but we talk about spin-outs and spin-ins. Spin-outs are about 20% of our companies, and they're companies that come out of the universities. So they're a much smaller part of what we do than people seem to assume. Certainly won't they think we were linked. But about 80% of that are companies that spin into the universities. So they're people who've got a project or an activity which would gain by working with the university or staff from university or facilities. We also have teams that get involved with licensing, acceleration, and also technology transfer in another form. At the moment, there's about 150 companies being incubated across the whole of the SETsquared network. Now, each centre is not exactly the same size and everything else. We have different space and different things. But I think it's worth noting that every single one of the incubation centres is linked to a university, but it's usually based in a science park. It's not part of a university campus type activity. We are separately and working together. However, the funding for what we do comes from a fund which is called the Higher Education Innovation Funding. And this is a pot of money that the government has put into the universities to help them work with SMEs and work with the area in the business space to try and get people to get engaged with universities. And it's seen very much as a two-way street. Across those 5 universities, about 9,000 academics who are involved with various bits of research and work. And somebody spoke earlier about exploiting the research that's done in universities, publicly funded, and getting it out into the commercial space. And a lot of the work we do is around academics and working with academics, getting them to understand that some of the stuff they're doing could be commercially exploited. But as I said, only about 20% of it comes out from them. We're very lucky, as I say. The 5 universities between us attract about 15% of the total UK Research Council budget, which last year was about 400 million. So it's a big chunk of the money that goes from the public purse into the universities, and we're sort of tasked with trying to help them exploit that. When we look at projects, we look at it from the point of view of, is it a high growth space? And somebody talked about scalability earlier. One of the things we always look at with our businesses is, could it be something that people would want to buy, keep buying, and keep going and expanding on? They're always high tech, and that can be a number of different things, and they're usually disruptive in what they're doing. Quite often, the first thing we have to work with people on, either coming in or coming out, is really understanding their business proposition. Because although the 80% are coming in, quite often they're technology people. They've got a brilliant idea, they think it's really clever, they know the universities can help them exploit it, they want to work with the universities, but quite often they're so hooked up on their technology, they've forgotten what the customer wants. So they've forgotten to understand it. And a lot of the early stuff we do around the business model canvas is about them really understanding what the value proposition is. So just because it goes faster doesn't mean somebody's going to buy it. But if you tell me I can do twice the amount of work, because it's happening with the same amount of resource, then that's interesting from a customer point of view. And we try and get them to move away from that. And that leads into the next part of it, which is around the management team. Management team development to us is really important. So you might have a really smart professor or a really clever technologist, but just because they're clever and smart doesn't mean they can actually run a business. We don't always tell them that to start with, because it's quite hard for a professor to be told that, but you try and work with them to understand that. So what we do is a lot of times we have a very extensive pool across the 5 of people who have run businesses before, technology businesses usually, who want to keep involved with these sorts of businesses. And somebody was talking about mentors. We use mentors extensively. So one of the first things that we do with an organisation is talk to them about a mentor and get a mentor appointed. We put a fairly structured process. So as an incubator, we try, people have to aspire to get into SETsquared. Not everybody gets into it. We have to make it, and there's barriers there. Now, one of the luxuries we've got is we are not responsible for selling the space in the science parks we work in. We don't have to fill the space. We've got a space, which is usually our incubation space. Whether it's 100% full or whether it's 50% full doesn't make any difference to us as an incubation organisation. Now, I know that's a little bit hard for some places because, of course, you have to fill your space. You have to keep the desk full to keep your earning going. We're very lucky from that point of view. But one of the first things we do is a company comes through the door. We then work with them. And usually there's an equivalent of myself in each of the centres, who is a centre manager. And I spend a lot of time with those simple questions, is there anybody going to buy it? Is there anybody going to keep buying it? What's it going to be like when it's made? Those sorts of very simple things. And we work from that, using the business model canvas usually, to understand, is it really scalable? And then if we think it's worthwhile, then we start talking about creating a business plan. And once I've got to a point where that business plan, and it's usually not huge, it's a 10-page document usually, a real statement of intent, but what it does is it ties people down to understanding what's going on. We then have a panel that looks at that and says, we think this is a company who could get into SETsquared and support what's going on with it. So they have to get into it. But what that means is the companies that get in are really pleased. We charge them for it when they get in as well. So we charge them a monthly fee for being a member of SETsquared. Even though we've got government funding to do this, we charge them because we've discovered people don't value something they get for free. So we work really hard and we charge them for it. So it's not a huge fee. And to be honest, what we do with them is we usually subsidise some of their space in the unit to do that. And in fact, we charge them £100 a month. The first desk that they've usually got, I give them a £100 subsidy on it. If they get a second desk, I give them another £100. So it's costing them £100, but they're actually getting £200. But what we're trying to do is get them to grow. And if you make it easy for them to step up, the next stage, which is when they look at it again, it's easier. They're not so worried about it. Because one of the big problems for these organisations is, how do I employ somebody? How do I find somebody? How do I get a contract for them? How do I put them in a space? So we spend a lot of time working with them on that. So once they're in the programme, they work with people like myself. We try to encourage them. We are the sort of go-to point. Some of the stuff I'll talk about later on is about funding, but I'll often get somebody coming to me. We deliberately have our desks in the incubation space, so we're immediately accessible. I sit there, I do all my work in that space, and they come past and say, do you know somebody who's done that? Do you know somebody at this organisation? Do you know somebody who can help with this? And we use that as a very informal. As I said, we appoint mentors. The mentors are quite often people who've been through SETsquared, who've been involved in it. We're very lucky. We've been going 10 years. We've got quite a big alumni of people who've created organisations, things that are going on. So we use those as mentors. We've also got a reputation, because we make it quite hard for people to get into. When we talk to people about a SETsquared company, they know there's a certain amount of work we've done with them. They're a sort of credible organisation already. So people want to us, and we're very lucky that the mentors come to us. We work them through it. And a mentor is there usually somebody who understands the technology space, understands the IP strategy they may be working with, understands just taking a business and growing it. The other thing we do with them is these regular business review panels. A business review panel is, as the name implies, we have a panel of people who review the business with the individuals. So every 3 to 4 months of the process through the incubation period, the business will have a sit down, 1 to 5 people maybe. 5 people being maybe a lawyer, an accountant, an IP specialist, somebody who's run the business or done something very similar, working through with them. It's 2 hours of time that most of the chief execs, when they first do it, are absolutely petrified. Because somebody's told them that they can't look at their business now, not the technology they're usually comfortable with. And we take them into that. I support them going into it, but I don't actually get involved with it at the time. I take notes for them. And that panel will ask them the challenging questions like, have you sold anything? Who are you selling it to? When did we last do anything that was, have you spoken to? These sorts of contacts and knowledge that you get from these people. At the end of that panel, I write a report where I sit down with the organisation and we go through it. And quite often there's contacts come out, the suggestions come out. 3 or 4 months' time, we'll rerun that panel. And that panel will have the same basic members on it. So if they said to you, have you spoken to or go and talk to, you know in 3 or 4 months' time that somebody's going to come to you and say, how did you get on with? And it challenges them, and it really works very well. It's by the second or third one, the company runners are looking for it. They're enjoying it. They want to do it. It's going the wrong way. I thought I'd give you a scan of the sort of portfolio. This is a Johari window which I created, which is around technology readiness along the bottom, going from early stage to market ready, and revenue, pre-revenue and revenue generating. I use this a lot with our investors. We get a lot of people who want to get involved with us and they want to see what we've got within our portfolio. This is Southampton only. So this is only for Southampton. The ones down the bottom here are what really the pre-incubation space. These are the ones where we're working with them. They're not ready yet. They're not strong yet. But actually, they're actually beginning to be something that we should get involved with. But they've not joined SETsquared. These blue ones here, actually I should say, that this dark greens, the dark greens are pre. This one here, early stage technology, but it's got revenue. The reason for that is they raised £127,000 on Kickstarter. They've got a problem. They're supposed to deliver 400 units by Christmas. They haven't got a hope. They are absolutely, they hadn't got any contracts in place, they hadn't got anything in place. And the real danger with the crowdfunding thing is, he got really enthusiastic, did a really good video, it's a flying car, it's sexy, it's beautiful, it's that big, it jumps in the air. People wanted it, and they wanted it as a Christmas present. He sold 400 of them. It was one. So you've got to really think about, when you push people down that crowdfunding route, we've got to think about, have they got the ability to deliver on it? So that was an interesting one. So it stands out as an anomaly. These other ones here, this technology is getting pretty good, but he hasn't got any revenue yet. These blue ones here are all the ones that are actually sitting within the science part, but they don't actually sit within the incubation centre. So there's a number of organisations there. These green ones here sit within the incubation centre that we've got and work through. And then these ones at the top are our stars, as we call them. They're the ones that have gone through. They've already alumni. There is, I'll talk about some of those in a second, but there is a number of those that have gone through. So I've found this quite a useful tool for explaining to investors. And what's interesting is when you have a conversation with an investor, there are some that get excited by these down the bottom here. And there are some that look at this and go, oh, I want that. You can gauge what the investor wants. They can understand it. It's what their readiness is. And it works through very well. So one of those companies up the top there, Primer Design. Sorry, the size of the oval is roughly sort of the size of the organisation. Gives you a rough idea of the sort of scale of the organisation. There is no proper metric there, but so Primer Design, really interesting company. What's interesting about these is they started with £40,000 of initial investment. They're going to turn over 2.6 million this year. They are academics that came out of the academic world, but what they did is they have got Primer being primers for DNA testing. So they are able to produce very, very quickly tests for DNA. Now, initially, the first thing they did was swine flu, which got them off the ground. So when the swine flu came out, bird flu came out, they had a testing kit within 3 days, and it was sold all over the world. The last thing that happened for them, I was talking to them 3 months ago, no, a little bit longer than that, 4 months ago, they were going to do 2.1 million this year. Then horse DNA came along. They had a horse DNA testing kit within 5 days, sold it all the way around. They're doing 2.6 million this year. They've had to adjust to coping with that. Now, the interesting thing about these guys is they're an example of getting into business for an academic, but they're not full bore. So actually 20% of the profit from that organisation goes into a children's home in Gambia. They take their team out there to go and talk to them. So they kept that sort of academic ethos, but they're doing good business. So they're an example of what can be done. These two are a little bit more hardcore. Ilika, interesting because it has a very interesting business model. What Ilika can do is, you want to create a battery technology or a material to go into a battery. They have productionized the process of testing for those materials. So these machines here enable you to lay down different layers of material. So if somebody says to you, well, I want a battery technology that is very quick to charge but discharges very slowly, they will go off and discover that material for you. You'll pay them to do that. But what's interesting about their business model is they then actually license back to you the R&D that you've paid for your sector and for your application. So Toyota are working with them on battery technology for cars. They've developed it for them, sold them the license to operate that battery and that battery technology, but they still have the core license as well. So they have a very strong IP analysis of what is actually in that container. And primarily what they're looking for is dirty bomb materials, radiation type materials, those sorts of things. Now what this was is a sensor that was being used to look at stars and the composition of stars. Smart professor worked on it, worked an algorithm up, and then said to us, we can do something. And now they actually started turning it around and looking at this. This is so sensitive, you can actually have something in a lead shielded box, and they're able to tell you what is inside it. Big thing for them is this contract that they've got, 220 million framework contract with the US Department of Homeland Defence. Drawdown contract, they're not worth 220 million at the moment, but they can draw that down over the next year. They're going to turn over 4 million this year, and then they're going to turn over 8 again next year. So those are some of the companies, but we try to get the whole spectrum, as you saw going through. Those are some of the stars. We build up throughout the year to an annual investor event, and we run, each of the 5 centres has their local investor event, but we also run this annual event. And what we've discovered is the majority of venture capitalists and larger business angels work out of London. They won't come out to the provinces, they won't come out to the country to do it. So we take a roadshow up to London, we promote through a number of our channels, and there's some literature around from the event we ran yesterday. We usually get 150 odd venture capitalists turn up to it. The companies that are pitching, we take only 20 companies there from the whole of the organisation, and from those 20, only 9 actually pitch. To get to that, a lot of our companies are, this aspirational thing. They wanted to aspire to be in SETsquared. We want them to aspire to present at this sort of event. We run a program of local selection, so we nominate, and then we run 2-day investor readiness training, which some of the other people have talked about investor readiness training. The investor readiness training is more about preparing them for the investment and helping them with the pitch. We don't push particularly hard the pitching, but we try to give them the skills to do it. It's about the proposition. We then have 3 pre-selection days where we get some friendly business angels in who look at the companies that everybody's putting up, and they cut them down and they weed them back. But the guys who have done the training, they get the chance to pitch their idea. So it's really good training for them. They get nervous and it works really well. But the investor selection days will then look, this year we had 40 and we cut it down to 20, as I said. And then of that 20, we actually normally have 8, but this year we managed to get 9 going. And for us, it was a very successful year. We had 3 of the 9 that were pitching and 5 of the 20 that were exhibiting at that event. So we were very pleased. If you divide 20 by 5, it should only be 4, so we worked that. And I think that's something that I would perhaps flag up. We are 5 separate centres. We work under one brand, we work together. But one of the interesting things, and I was listening to stuff earlier, I wondered about, because we are all slightly different, I think we're stronger because we slightly compete against each other. And sometimes I think we're always looking for harmonisation, but perhaps there's disharmony that could be interesting to work with. I don't know if anybody started thinking about that, but if we took some of the disharmony that we've got, actually it makes this a stronger organisation. It would be very easy if we were all exactly the same to become quite lazy, because we've got good business population, we've got good money flowing in, we've got all those things. Why are we pushing forward as we are? And I suspect it's because of the internal challenges that we're facing with each other. just to give you some of the activities that we do locally, Ignite was a series of events that we run. We have to be embedded in the local business culture. And the way we do that is not about the incubation, but it's about the education piece. Because of this, the link to the university, it opens up massive doors for us. And we're very lucky that we can use the name of the university to actually get into places and ask things. So we've had national organisations that come and talk at these events. Technology Strategy Board, which doesn't mean anything to you, but it's a national innovation agency. MAT, we have national organisations that come to these events because they want to be associated with us doing what we're doing. We've also got very embedded, and the university in the UK have become much more involved in economic development. Up until about 2 years ago, university and economic development didn't go together. At that time, Julie, when did they take CEDA away?
2005.
Yeah. At that point, they took away our wider regional development agencies and they created these local enterprise partnerships. The university is now being driven and rewarded to start working with them, and SETsquared has the chance to work with them. So we work with the local enterprise partnerships and the city councils to help them create infrastructure that supports businesses. So we do the incubation stuff, but we're also doing the wider stuff. And out of that, we get some of these 80% coming at us. So it's a very interesting way of working. We've also got, as I said, the Investor Network, and each Easter I run a showcase which is like a mini version of that London event. So people who didn't get into the London one get a chance to use their skills at the Easter one. So it works very well from that point of view. We're also, as I said, embedded in the science parks. Now, the science park have a mantra which is about putting science back into the science park. We had a problem that there was too many companies coming into the science park that weren't science related. And it was beginning to devalue it. It was becoming a business park. So we've actually gone a thing. And part of that is we've created a Catalyst Centre, which is about taking people who could not afford to get into any incubation process, providing them with free space and business support and advice, and program of support that we run through with them. It's a pipeline feeder for what I do, but it also, they look at it and say, well, we want to be a SETsquared company at the end of it. As a science park, we've been very successful in getting hold of grants. One of the things I would say about grants is we use grants to leverage investor funding. So quite often we will set up a company to get a grant by sending an application, and most funding in the UK is either match funded. We'll then go to the investors and say, look, they've managed to get this grant. It's an easier investment for you because you know you've doubled the money already. So it's a very strong mechanism for doing that. And I think it wasn't mentioned anywhere else, but these sorts of use of grants as a lever is really, really good. We've also just got, within the local enterprise partnership, we've managed to get them to accept this, and they have got a pot of money which they're going to use as a match funding pot for us locally as well. The interesting thing about that, I would say, is remembering the genders, most of the grants are around technology, and the other side will be around jobs, creation of jobs. And that's usually what it is. So you have to remember what's going. I've just been given the hurry up, so I will. 2 programs that are central to what we do. Research to Innovator, one of the things that's quite challenging is PhD students. We all think they should come out as businesses. They're a nightmare. So we've created a program across the network which is around taking them away, investing them in things, trying to say to them, it's not that scary, but it's not as easy as you think. Quite often, some of the stuff we do with them seems really networking, building networks, understanding how to work with other people, those sort of activities. We've got central funding to do that. Halfway through at the moment, and we've got some really good stuff around there. The other one, which I got intellectual property money to do, UK intellectual property money, is to run a thing called Meet the Primes. Primes are the person who is contracted, usually by a government agency, to build something or do something, battleship, whatever. They're all looking for open innovation. They're all looking for those little companies that are doing things at the moment. We created a series of tools and stuff around that. We have got money to run those events, but also we were looking at it working the other way. So some of these larger organisations have technology sitting on their shelf that they can never get to market, but some of our companies might be able to. So it's around that sort of side of things. I'll whiz those through. Probably, I think the strongest one for us is this 90% survival rate. We've got over 1,000 companies we've created. This one politically is, we are the longest running UK university partnership. For those of you who work in universities, you know how hard it is to get one university to work together. To get 5 to work together is a big achievement in itself. 1,200 jobs. Strangely enough, it's our 10th anniversary, and we went through the £1 billion raised mark this year. So for companies that have been through us, we've raised over £1 billion in the last 10 years. And I don't know if anybody else has come across the University Business Incubator report that just came out of Sweden, I think it was. We're ranked 4th in the world for what goes on, and we're also ranked #1 in Europe. So